Hello and welcome to the second in the series of comparative practice essays for IB Music. This is for the prescribed works component and specifically for higher level, although standard level students would equally benefit from the information this contains. Imagine if you were confronted with this essay question in your examination. Discuss how Haydn varies the material in one of the variations offered in the second movement. Compare this to one of the variations in the Rachmaninoff, identifying both similarities and differences between the two variations. For the purposes of this sample essay, I have selected the minore variation in the second movement of the Haydn and variation 6 in the Rachmaninoff. What follows is a sample answer to that question. The second variation in Haydn's second movement is unique in a number of ways. Firstly, the variation opens in the parallel minor, C minor, outlining the tonic, first two bars, and the dominant seventh, bars 3 and 4. These opening 4 bars are unprecedented in that the material appears in unison, here merging string and woodwind timbres. Oh, that's an anagram. That's better. What is perhaps even more unusual is the material that follows, not least the fact that it is based on the closing portion of the B section of the original theme. In the 5th bar, the music takes an unexpected turn as we jump immediately into an A-flat chord. Retrospectively, one can perhaps view the G7 chord as assisting this shift, that is, 7/7 of 6. Therefore, the G7 actually has a dual function, to not only prolong the sense of the new key, C minor, but also to contribute to a shift to the submediant, which is in itself a means to modulate to the relative major by the end of this 8-bar phrase to E flat. The submediant in C minor is of course one of the primary chords of the new key. It's the subdominant. Thus, this short 8-bar segment actually is a microcosm, if you will, of the entire original theme, which is 32 bars in length. Continuing with this notion of uniqueness, the B portion of the original theme, bars 17 to 32, is ostensibly absent in the second half of this variation from bar 57, with instead fragments from the A portion initially appearing in both an imitative fashion based on the cycle of fifths, but in broader terms forming an ascending sequence. You can see there initially E flat, B flat, and then moving upwards by step to F and C. This can also be illustrated in this typical cycle of fifths form. You can see there in broader terms an ascending sequence. A newly formed motivic fragment within this variation is used to extend this material further, initially appearing in bar 57 and then with greater regularity and in modified form from bar 61. Along with scalic runs also evident from the start of the second section, but becoming more pronounced and significant in the latter portion. Bar 65 there, and 67 and 69 in the following slide. These ideas are combined with a dotted rhythmic idea, which collectively reach a mini cadenza at the end of the variation. In addition to the variation within a variation technique utilized here, this is the first time that the 8-bar phrasing structure has been disrupted from the start of the movement. With all the additional material that appears here, this second section actually contains 13 bars, bar 57 through to bar 69, excluding the cadenza-like material in the violin ones that closes out the variation. This closing material has a number of functions. 1. To provide a transition between the grand material, in which the trumpets and drums also contribute, bars 65 through to 69, with the softer opening of the third variation. 2. To assist in the return to the important melodic material that has largely been absent. Taken from the opening there. And 3, that the use of the half-diminished seventh chord that is outlined, A, F, D, B, helps to restore the parallel major, which is the home key of C. Interestingly, this was the harmonic means in which we shifted away from C minor at the start of the variation. 7/7 of 6 there. Bookending the variation with comparable harmonic strategies. More broadly speaking, with the inclusion of the A and B material in the opening 8 bars, it's as though Haydn has granted himself permission to deviate from the original theme in the second section. With the return to important arpeggiated material at the close, this codetta provides a hint of ternary to the variation. With the 6th variation in the Rachmaninoff being the first to deviate from the obvious binary structure, it would be opportune to analyze this particular moment for comparison between the works. With the inclusion of a mini cadenza in the piano part, bar 5 and bar 12 of variation 6, the original 4-bar phrase structure of the Paganini theme has been disrupted in a manner similar to the second section of the second variation in the Haydn, and more specifically in the closing portion of that variation that has just been illustrated. However, here the purpose of the cadenza is merely to elongate the dominant in both cases, and not to specifically provide transition. The second of these mini cadenzas in bar 12 includes an additional octave. Interestingly, the half-diminished seventh chord that precedes both of these mini cadenzas is a D-sharp half-diminished seventh, which functions to provide a stronger pull towards the dominant in each case. 7 half-diminished seventh of 5, bars 4 and 5, and bars 11 and 12. In the Haydn, the half-diminished chord was used to assist in returning to the tonic for the next variation. One other important connection between these two variations is the surprising modulation. This is, albeit brief, in the Rachmaninoff, but by no means insignificant. The shift to A flat occurs towards the end of the variation, bar 49. This is immediately corrected, if you will, to A minor with the perfect cadence, E7 to A, in the ensuing bars, bar 50 to 51. The A flat chord could be interpreted in a broader context as a neighboring harmony. And perhaps in this context labeled a predominant chord. Later in the work, these chords, which are semitonally adjacent to traditional functional harmony, replace the dominant altogether. This is seen in more pronounced terms in subsequent variations, such as the C-sharp minor at the end of variation 13, which in this instance functions as the dominant to the F major material that follows. Links can certainly be made to the use of the 7 half-diminished seventh at the close of the variation 2 in the Haydn. The dominant is actually arrived at in bar 69, and the 7th half-diminished seventh is actually encapsulated in a broader dominant prolongation there. However, with the organization of Rachmaninoff's work progressively moving towards more explorative initiatives in its latter stages, this sixth variation still maintains strong affiliations with tonic and dominant harmonies, embedded or assumed in Paganini's original theme. Each of the sections in Rachmaninoff's Variation 6 begin and end with these harmonies. You can see there in section A, tonic to dominant movement. Section B is also centered around these key areas, and in the codetta, as we've just illustrated, there is a side step to A flat towards the end. Thus, it can be safely said, and although perhaps surprisingly, the sectionalization in Haydn's variation is marked by a greater adventure in its modulations and exploration of key. Initially set in the parallel minor C, then to the submediant temporarily A flat, to the relative major, E flat, and via F minor and G major to an outlined B half diminished chord, sets up the return to C major. Along with the harmonic similarities mentioned earlier, probably the most obvious is the shift to which both of these variations contribute, and that is away from the AABB seen previously in the respective works, towards either a hint or a direct reference to a ternary structure. The codetta in both instances contains either a citation, in the case of the Haydn, to the A material, here in the form of a fragment, or to a more direct transplanting of earlier material in the case of the Rachmaninoff. However, here the function of the earlier material has been transformed to provide closure to the movement and contribute to a greater sense of symmetry. With noticeable and unique rests at the start and the end of this variation, the Rachmaninoff, bookended by this material, broadly outlines something akin to palindromic features. Somewhat removed from the original two-part simplicity of Paganini's theme. While the Haydn is perhaps more explorative with the sectionalized modulations, both use the seventh chords to either bring attention to the chords that follow, or in the case of the Haydn, assist in a surprising harmonic shift. There are closer connections with the broader structure in each, and both demonstrate a similar shift away from the original source. Finally, the use of the mini cadenzas in each case help to expand the chords to which they are attached. The Rachmaninoff elongates the dominant early in the variation, bars 4 and 5 and bars 11 and 12, and the Haydn similarly prolongs the dominant at the end of the variation by adopting a dominant enhancing chord in the form of a B half diminished seventh. I'm going to leave you with a recording of Rachmaninoff's Variation 6 and Haydn's Variation 2, just the opening sections, are heard simultaneously. I hope that this summary and this response to a practice sample essay has helped you in your own preparations for the forthcoming examinations.